Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
My name is Adam Jones. We just interviewed Annie Duke, who is the superstar poker pro who wrote the book Thinking in Bets and takes the analogy of poker and applies it to life so you can make better decisions with all the shit that you do.
That's it. It's all about making better decisions because, as she sort of says, you know, there's a few things that come into it. There's luck and there's skill. And there's also a lot of information about the decision that we don't have. So we're trying to make the best decision possible without all the information. So this book is all about making the best decision possible.
Yep. Better known as bets.
Making good bets.
Mate, the future is uncertain. So everything you do now, every decision you make, it is a bet in a way. And you need to optimize that to get where you want to go.
That's pretty much the main thing, I reckon, is you can't ever be 100% sure or 0% sure. You're always somewhere in between. So you've got to factor that into your decision making.
Mate, so yeah, love the interview with Duke. She talks a little bit about her actual poker career. I loved listening to her story with Eric Seidel.
Yeah.
And yeah, which makes an appearance. But yeah, is it Duke Dumont time?
Duke it up.
The Duke Highway.
The relationship between your decision quality and how things turn out, your outcome quality, is really, really super loosely linked when we're thinking about life's decisions. And it's because there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So there's hidden information. So there's things that are hidden from view. I mean, in poker, obviously, the cards are face down. So that sort of prevents you from making a theoretically perfect decision if you had perfect information. But then there's also just a lot of luck in the outcome, right? So even if there's no hidden information, so say I'm flipping a coin and I know that it will flip heads 50% of the time and tails 50% of the time in the long run, that doesn't mean I know for the next flip. So this causes a really big problem with our decision making because, first of all, we think that things are much more certain than they are. We don't really we don't operate as if these things are only loosely linked, how we make decisions and the quality of the outcome. And then when we're trying to learn from the way that things turn out, like experience is supposed to be our teacher, it's really hard to figure out why something happened because it could be luck, it could be skill, right? So, I mean, I guess the example I would give is if all I know that you got is that you got in a car accident, it's very hard for me to tell why. Like, did somebody hit you when you were following the rules of the road? Was it your fault in some way? Was it a combination of the two? It could have been some combination of like luck, there was just bad luck, but maybe you also did something wrong. So like you hit an ice patch, so that would be luck, but then you steered away from the skid instead of toward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that would, right. So we don't, and it's just hard to see because all I know is that you got in an accident. And so I think that that's actually really the main thing that mucks our decision making up.
Yeah, nice. So you said there's luck comes into it, skill comes into it, there's incomplete information, there's always risk. There's so many things that we need to try and take into account when making decisions. And as you said, then we don't separate the outcome from the decision, and that you call it resulting, and that we use the outcome to determine whether it was a good decision or not, rather than just looking at the decision in isolation.
Right, and like this is the thing that we do all the time, right? So, and it's like a variety of different ways. So, leaders do it a lot to their employees. Like an employee closes a sale and they're like, "You're a genius! What a great leader you are!"
Yeah.
If an employee doesn't close a sale, it's like, "What did you do wrong?" And obviously, that's you could have. I was saying this today to somebody else that like you could close a sale and not have done anything particularly right. It could just be that the person was going to buy whatever you had to sell no matter what. Like you could have sent like a golden retriever in and they would have been able to sell it too, right? Or you could not close a sale and it could be because of things that are completely out of your control, right? It could be the wrong time in the fiscal year, or you could just have a product that the best salesman in the world wouldn't be able to sell, and it's hard to tell. I mean, I think one of the most telling things that I've done in the work that I do that really demonstrates this is I'll go into groups and I'll say to them, "Hey, before we come and work together, I would like you to have everybody in the group write down the best decision that they made in the last year and the worst decision they made in the last year." So I'm asking them to tell me something about a decision quality, right? and they all come in, and I have yet to have somebody do something different. They all tell me the best thing that happened to them, like the best outcome they had in the last year, and the worst outcome they have in the last year. The weird thing is nobody's ever comes in and says, like, I made this great decision and it turned out disastrous. I made this terrible decision and man, did it turn out well. Nobody ever does that because we link it together so tightly.
Yeah. Whenever there's a good outcome, we say it's skill, and when it's bad, we say, oh, it's just all bad luck.
Right, exactly. And the thing is that here's the problem is that if we think about, like, how do we improve the quality of our decisions? Well, we learn from our experiences, but if we're not sorting those things off kind of into the right buckets, right, into this has to do with something that I did in terms of my own decisions that I could then repeat, versus like getting it into the bucket of that was totally out of my control, then we're really going to learn pretty bad lessons from the way that things turn out. So, like, again, a very simple example, if I flip a coin and you call it heads, and I'm like, I'm going to bet on you on coin flipping from now on. That's probably that's a pretty bad decision. But I'm pretty good
at it, Annie. Pretty good at coin flipping.
There's places where we can get like a lot of consensus on what the quality of the decision is, where I can get you to really see how silly it is to work backwards. Like you drive while you're drunk and you get home safely. I hope you're not saying like, let me do that again. So like then you can see through it really clearly. But for our own lives, we don't see it very well. Like, my son, all during high school, he'd come home and he'd, get a bad grade on a test. And it was always like, there were things on the test that the teacher didn't, give us. And it was just an extra hard test. And, no mention whatsoever. Perhaps he didn't study.
Didn't do enough.
It was always things having to do with the teacher or things having to do with the test itself. And then when he'd do really well on a test, it was always his brilliant studying and how hard he worked. And I think any parent will recognize that pattern. I think we can all sort of recognize that in ourselves. So, and the problem is that then you're not learning.
Yeah.
So then you're making poor decisions.
Nice. So there's a hell of a lot of reasons why we're not so good at making decisions. And you said that having bets is a good way to, account for some of those things. Admit to ourselves that we're not 100% sure, that we're not completely certain. There's things that we don't know about. So what's the idea about, bringing bets into all the decisions that we make?
Sure. So if we think about it, whenever we make a decision, there's a set of possible outcomes that could happen. Some good, some bad, some mediocre, but there's a lot of different ways it could go. So if I go out and I'm driving through an intersection, I could get through safely, I could get a ticket, I could get into an accident, I could get into a near accident, a variety of things could happen. But we act like, once we know the outcome that we know exactly what happened, right? So we don't really understand very well the uncertainty in the way that things turn out. That, just because you make great decisions doesn't mean that you have great results, at least not on one try. Just because you make bad decisions doesn't mean you have bad results. Likewise, so we don't really understand the uncertainty there. But the other thing that we really aren't very good at is understanding the uncertainty in our own beliefs. If I give you enough time, I can get there. So if I say to you, can you think of something that you believed for certain when you were 15 that you now believe was just, hooey? And you're like, sure, yes, everything I believed when I was 15 was very right. But at the time, right, yeah. So, well, now I want to hear more about it.
We'll stay away from conspiracy theories today. It's for another day.
So if I give you a lot of time, like if I give you a lot of years in between, you'll like recognize, oh yeah, I have some beliefs that I thought that were really certain, but maybe I was actually a little bit wrong about them. And in the history of humans, we can see this. Like we used to think that the sun revolves around the earth. For example. So there's a lot of uncertainty in our beliefs, and generally our beliefs shouldn't actually sit like in the right or wrong category. They should sit in between in the in progress category. Nice. And you're sort of trying to move the ball toward, more certainty, but you can't really get there. So what thinking in bets does is it basically puts a magnifying glass on the uncertainty.
Yes.
So, right. So you declare something, that's for sure, like, well, here's one that's going on in America right now. People are talking about whether the Democrats or Republicans are going to take Congress in the fall, right? And I've heard a lot of people declare with 100% certainty, like the Democrats are going to win the Senate. So that's obviously acting as if it's 100%, like what's going to happen into the future is 100%. So if I were to say to them, well, do you want to bet? And you can think about this for yourself. Like if I said that to you, if you declared that and I said, do you want to bet? All of a sudden you're like, well, hold on a second. You know,
maybe not. 100%.
Let me think about this for a second.
Yeah.
Let me start doing a little bit of research. So what it does is it gets you to understand that, wait a minute, my beliefs are in progress. They're actually not 100%. Yeah. And any prediction that I make of the future, there's going to be things that, there's going to be information that I don't have. There's going to be luck. And that's what that sort of want to bet construct does. And once you you sort of let the uncertainty bubble up to the surface, you're naturally going to be a better decision maker because you're going to be thinking more accurately about the world and your state of beliefs about it, which obviously will make you make better decisions.
Yeah, phenomenal. I really love that, Annie. So our future's obviously got this, big uncertain element, and we want to probably maximize the upside of what our future is. And you've been talking about this certainty versus uncertainty. Do you think we're better off actually inviting more uncertainty into our lives to potentially maximize the upside, but maybe at the cost of some downside as well?
Well, first of all, I think it depends on what your values are. It depends on, what your own risk tolerance is. So, like, I can't definitively say for somebody, hey, you should be taking on a lot more risk. Like, because for example, I don't understand what your situation is, right? So, for example, there are different things. Like, I could tell you sort of in a general sense, not for a specific individual, but generally, the amount of risk that somebody who's 25 would be willing to take would be different than the amount of risk that somebody who's 70 might take. And that just has to do with like the amount of time that you can sort of recover from a disaster, for example, or from the downside, right? Like, yeah. So, if you're 25 and you have something that really doesn't go your way, you've got a lot of time to recover from it, but if you're 70, maybe not so much. So there are all sorts of things that would determine that for you. But in general, like as a general rule, what I would say is that people will very, very often, and it depends on sort of what their state of being is, either take on way too much risk, and that would be in a case where essentially they feel like they're losing already and they're trying to get to where they're winning. Or they become really risk intolerant, and that's where they're just sort of protecting themselves against losing. So what most people are doing in their lives is actually the second thing. So they're generally just trying to reduce the number of losses that they have, and by reducing the chances that they lose and how much they lose, they're actually just by definition, they're also reducing the amount that they can win.
Yeah, because somewhere in the book, I think you talk about how losing hurts twice as much as winning. So this probably shapes a lot of our decisions, or makes us make bad decisions.
Yeah, so I can specifically get you into a state where you'll make bad decisions in the other way. As an example, if I have you playing poker and a cat's going to come in. Hi, cat.
We had a dog in our last interview on our end, so that's okay.
There's a cat who may come in. But, so if I have you sitting at a poker table and I get you to where you're losing, here comes the cat. Okay. Yeah. And I get you to where you're losing, you might actually make some very risky decisions in order to get out of that state, right? Yeah. But for the most part, the way that you're going to be making decisions is actually going to be trying to avoid ever getting into the losing state in the first place. So I can give you an example, like from sales. If you're playing that kind of strategy, then what's going to happen is that you're going to try to close lots and lots and lots of sales, but you're going to do it early and probably too low in order to avoid ever coming close to breaking a deal, because breaking a deal will feel like losing to you. Yeah. So you'll just take a lot of really small wins in order to not have the rejection. Yeah. Right? Like, I mean, I can give you examples from like dating, from like you can sort of find this behavior everywhere, but it's like when what you're doing is just trying to minimize the feeling of regret you're going to have, or the emotion that you have around losing. then what happens is that you stop actually winning.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah,
So
that's
someone will,
nice.
so if they're, trying to get a new partner or something, they'd probably stop going out of the fear of rejection, when the upside is actually, potentially finding someone, a partner.
Right.
How to go.
Exactly. Right. So the extreme case of that would be you just stop asking people out.
Yeah.
Because you're so afraid of getting a no that you don't even try. The other thing, that might happen is that you might only ask people out who you sort of consider like sure yeses. So that's obviously really narrowing your sphere of the people that you could date. But you're losing the upside there, right? Because you just don't want to hear a no, because maybe, and this very often happens when you've gotten some no's in a row, and you're sort of very sensitive to that feeling. But a lot of people sort of live their life with that strategy, right? Like they're not taking those kinds of chances for fear of things not working out. It's some of the reason why people might be miserable in a job and still not change their job, because they're afraid that if they quit and they try to go look for another job, what if I don't find one? And they're not thinking about sort of what's happening with them in the situation that they're in right then.
Fantastic.
But now dating advice from Andy Duke. There you go.
Maybe that's the next book.
Yes.
I was thinking as we were talking about betting. Maybe I don't know what the culture's like in the US. I feel like it's a little bit more strict. But in Australia, we've got casinos in every city. We literally have public holidays for horse races where everyone goes in the morning to place their bets once a year. So maybe it's easier for Aussies to think in bets, and it's sort of like allowing this uncertainty. You were talking about how we've got our beliefs, and then everything we see around us, this confirmation bias, strengthens our beliefs until someone comes along and says, do you want to bet on that? Are you willing to bet on that? And that's maybe the circuit breaker, potentially, from thinking, seeing everything one way and thinking, hang on, maybe I need to question myself here. How can we sort of get more of it, people around us to, break that circuit of just always thinking of one belief?
Yeah, so I think that there's kind of two ways to do it, and what I would say is it depends on whether the people are kind of in on the joke with you or not. So the first thing I would highly recommend for anybody is go find some people who you think would be like-minded, gather them around you, and create a group where you have an agreement that you're going to challenge each other. So that what happens is that when you know that you're going to be challenged, there's a few, and the challenge would be around accuracy, right? So you're committing to trying to build an accurate view of the world, as opposed to a view that's just like, I know I'm right, we're great, we're awesome, let's all talk about how great we are and how everything we think is completely true. Instead, it would be, I'm going to challenge this belief that you might have, like, I have a different opinion, or what do you think about this, or here's why maybe you were biased in the way that you were interpreting that, or let me give you this alternative version. I mean, I guess we can go back to the dating thing. If I were in an agreement with somebody where I had made this agreement to accuracy, to holding them accountable, and them holding me accountable to the way that I might be thinking, and being willing to hear when they disagreed with me or hear alternative viewpoints, then let's say that I'm having a conversation with, say, a girlfriend of mine, and she's complaining to me about how, like, oh man, the last 10 guys I dated were all jerks. Like, they were all such jerks, and they all treated me so horribly. Now, notice this is all like nothing to do with her, right? Like, then I would be allowed to say, because we've agreed to it, I'd be allowed to say, like, basically, well, what do you think your part in that was? Do you really think it's just all 10 of them were jerks? And if they said yes, I mean, hopefully I would challenge it. Then I would say, well, do you think maybe the responsibilities that you're choosing people like that? So why don't you think about, like, what are the choices that you're making? But maybe you should also think about, like, what your part in that relationship is, that, so I could ask all those kinds of questions that otherwise somebody might get really offended by.
Yeah. Well, that's
right? They're really
quite common.
Sympathy there.
Well,
yeah.
Especially that example of girls thinking all guys are jerks. I hear that quite a bit from girls, and then they just won't go out.
And then you made it, and they confirm it.
Yeah, no, they are change their mind.
So now you can just say, this is your confirmation bias. Yeah. So that's like, so that would be like if we had agreed to it. But the thing is that even if you don't have an agreement, right? So we haven't agreed that we're going to challenge each other in this way. You can still get there. You just have to do it a little bit more subtly. So I'm having a discussion. You're telling me about how, everybody you date is a jerk. And instead of me saying, well, what do you think your partner that is? Or, do you think that maybe you're contributing in the relationship, or maybe you're picking people like that? Like, what do you think is going on? Instead of making those kinds of challenges, because we don't have that agreement, instead what I can do is just ask you how you're going to change it going forward. So I can I'll be a sympathetic ear, and I'll say, wow, that's really awful. It must be really frustrating. Seems like you've had really bad luck in the people that you've been dating. So like, what do you think you can do like in the future to maybe like find better people? Yeah. So in this case, like I haven't challenged your worldview. I haven't said, yo, you're really biased in the way that you're thinking about this. But in order for you to coherently answer the question about the future, you actually have to go back and think about what the skill portion was in the past, because otherwise your answer would be nothing. It's just bad luck, right? Yeah. But people generally won't answer nothing. So they sort of circle back around themselves to go find the skill in it. So, and in either way, I'm really just saying, like, do you want to bet? It's just in one place I'm saying it more directly. Like in one place I'm like, do you really want to bet that all those people were jerks, like nothing to do with you? Mm-hmm. And in the second case, I'm just sort of saying, like, how would you like to bet on the future?
Yeah, nice. So I like those two different approaches for if someone's open to it, and I guess depending on how strong the relationship is and those sort of things. Right. I like that. Another thing that I like that you talk about was like a decision swear jar. So keeping conscious of, things like, oh, I'm 100% or I'm sure, or I knew that was going to happen, or this always happens, or this never happens. So we need to always be keeping a constant check on ourselves as well, about that kind of language and that kind of thinking.
Yeah, so the nice thing about a decision swear jar is that you can set it up for yourself, but you can also, if you have people around you, if you have formed one of these groups, you can all agree to what those phrases are so that I can call you out on it. So if we're having a discussion and you just say you're wrong, I can be like, yo, decision swear jar.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is sort of think about different categories of the way that your habits of mind might be leading you astray, right? So one might be like use of the words right and wrong, right? Which I just said right. See, so there you go. So use of the words right and wrong, or, any kind of like black and white thinking, hindsight bias, where it feels like once something has happened, you should have known. So whenever you say like, oh, I should have known, or how could you not see that coming, or how could I not see that coming, that kind of thing. And really kind of walk through and, why do things like this always happen to me? Like, that's a really good one. That's just assuming like that was all luck, right? Why do these things always happen? Why are these always happening to me? So you can kind of go through for yourself, what are those trouble spots that you have, and what are the kind of things that go through your mind or come out of your mouth that really signal that you're falling into that kind of biased way of processing information. Really make a list of it for real, like list them out. If you do have a group, share it with them. And then the group will do two things for you. One is they can point out when you say them, but two, they can also add to the list. So they can say, I've also noticed that when you say this, it's not great. And then what this does for you is it just creates an extra opportunity for you to stop and reflect.
Yep.
So if you never make this list out, then you say all of these things without kind of noticing it. Like you don't even, they're so automatic to the way that we think and talk and speak to each other. You'll hear, once you make the list, you'll notice other people saying things like this all the time that you wouldn't have even noticed before. So it gives you that moment to say, okay, here's this list of things. I'm going to try to have some vigilance about it. And then when I hear it, it's this moment for you to say, let me reflect on the way that I'm thinking or processing the information. You're not going to catch every single time that you do it. In fact, probably you won't catch the majority, but you will catch it a lot, a little bit more. And I can tell you from my own experience as a poker player, being able to just catch a few more instances of it than you otherwise would have is really the key to learning. This stuff is really hard. We're all kind of a hot mess when it comes to decision making. If you can get yourself in line a little bit more than the next guy, I can tell you from my own experience, like it makes all the difference.
Yeah. I think I saw one of these instances in poker. I was watching YouTube, and I think it was the 2010 National Heads Up Poker Championship where you were heads up against Eric Seidel, and I think you had pocket nines, he had ace two. Anyway, you won the tournament and you beat him, and I think you're very good friends with Eric Seidel.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. But at the very end, most people would say, or, think it's some kind of skill, but at the very end you said, it followed my plan to get lucky. So, one of the biases usually is to take it as skill, but you swapped it around and said when you won, you got lucky, which might actually be humility as well, I think.
Well, so I don't really consider that humility so much as realism. Eric Seidel has won over $38 million in tournament poker.
Yeah.
So he is uncontroversially better than me. So
Yeah, okay. But you're a gun. You're a superstar.
I
My
was
voice
really
broke.
looking to get lucky against this person who was much better than I was. Like, no joke. I really was. That was like the strategy that I was executing.
Yeah.
So, and that's not to say like I'm not downgrading my skill at poker. Like I think that I'm better than the average Joe at poker. But he's better than the average Joe, right? Like
Yeah.
he's better than the person who's better than the average Joe. So in that case, I need to do as well as I can in terms of the skill elements that I do have control over. But I also understand that in a decision-making battle, he has the edge. So the only way for me to overcome that edge, because I can't like learn how to outthink him at poker in those 2 seconds that I'm playing. The only way for me to overcome that is to hope that luck goes my way. Now the good news is that the skill gap was narrow enough that luck could overcome the skill gap. So you can think about matchups where that's not true. Like if one, rugby team plays another where it's like, a rugby team of 8-year-olds, versus an actual professional rugby team, there's no amount of luck that's going to overcome that skill gap, right?
Yeah.
So at least we were close enough in skill that the luck could play out.
So going back to that dating example, if you're a 6 out of 10, you're better off not going out for the 9 out of 10, or you just put in a situation where you can somehow make luck play on your side. So I might use that.
That's the thing. It's like that's actually exactly why. Like, why not go for the 9 out of 10? Like, it really is the only problem is if you're only going for the 9s.
Yes.
Right? Like then you're limiting your universe in a bad way, where somebody who you sort of think of as a 6 might actually not be a 6 because they're amazing and they actually are beautiful, and like you totally learn to appreciate like how amazing they are, right? So if you're only, if you only ever ask somebody who you sort of consider to be like out of your league, that's going to be problematic. But trying, why not?
Yeah. There's no downside really having a crack.
There isn't. Like they say no. Like okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I've actually got a girlfriend. We've been harping on about this dating example.
Can I just also say, like, I hope that we all recognize that let's call a 9 not just looks, but maybe like incredible intellect and humor.
Definitely.
And the whole complete package of what a woman is.
Or male, or the other way around.
Yeah.
Or the other way around, exactly.
Definitely.
Whatever your flavor is.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So as we sort of start to wrap up, we always like to ask the people we speak to, what are some of your favorite books or some of the books that were most impactful on your life so far?
So, there are fiction books and nonfiction books that have very big impacts on me. One of the big fiction books that had a big impact on me would have been like Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, Slaughterhouse-Five, actually kind of anything by Kurt Vonnegut. There's like some like T.S. Eliot, there's just kind of a lot of that stuff in the fiction world where it was really just about like how beautifully people can write and the kinds of things that they're writing about, and sort of looking into the mind of a writer, that really have been very inspiring for me in my life. And then on the nonfiction side, there's a lot of stuff that's in the book that I cite, like, Thinking Fast and Slow and Predictably Irrational, and Super Forecasters by Phil Tetlock. And it's just like, basically it's like there's all this, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. There's all these really that Cass Sunstein, he has got a bunch of like there's all this stuff in the space of how do we think, how do our minds work, really what's going on inside of our decision making heads, that I think is so valuable in terms of really trying to improve. And then there's also just like some things that I've written just sort of that I've read rather in the mindfulness space. Nice. Like, just from, Buddhist monks and things like that I think are really valuable and really important to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, as you said, you mentioned a lot of books that probably some of those we've read, Thinking Fast and Slow and Predictably Rational, and we spoke to Dan Ariely, and we love those sorts of books as well. They're great, but you've definitely added a few more to our list.
And then
there.
There's one really big one, I would say, also that really has had a huge influence on my life, which is The Greatest Show on Earth, which is Richard Dawkins. I just think that the beauty of I think that what comes through in that is really understanding like the scientific method and what evidence means and how you interpret evidence and how you take something like how you take a theory that's meant to explain a set of facts and predict new things that you might find, for example, in order to reinforce that, what it means to think like a scientist and to be rational. Yeah. I think it's an amazing book. I'm a big consumer of stuff on evolution, just because I think that if there's something that can really teach you like precision of thought and how to think, like reading in that space is amazing.
Definitely. And if people want to find a bit out more about you or your cat in the background, is that your cat still roaming out?
Yeah. So someone came and closed the door that the cats got into, and one of my cats really doesn't like it when the door is closed. So
that was our issue last week as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if people want to find out more, where can they find all your awesome stuff?
Sure. So I'm gonna.
It's fine. We love the cat. Bit of animal. It's good.
There's a couple places. Twitter is definitely a place to find me at Annie Duke. And then also I have a website, annieduke.com, and there you can do a few things. If you want to hire me, you can hire me there. If you just want to contact me and write to me, that would be the place to do it. I do see all my mail. I also have a newsletter that I send out every Friday. And it's really taking current events, both in politics and business and science, and looking at them through the framework of thinking in bets and kind of trying to apply these lessons to the things that we are sort of out in the world in the atmosphere that week. You can see archives of the newsletter over on my site, annieduke.com. And then you can subscribe and actually have it hit your inbox every Friday if you want. And then you can also find out about me through howidecide.org. So that's a nonprofit that I co-founded, and we're actually trying to create energy around teaching decision-making and rational thinking to kids. So it's really trying to take the ideas of how do you become a better decision maker. And, the way that I kind of think about it is we used to teach kids big books of facts that they had to memorize, but everybody can go get a fact now. That's pretty easy to go find. Yeah, totally. And it would be much better if we were teaching kids how to reason about those facts. And so that's really our mission. So hopefully people will go look at howidecide.org as well.
It sounds fantastic. Well, thanks so much for that, and we really enjoyed the book, enjoyed chatting, and looking forward to seeing what you do next. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it, you guys.
Enjoy New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. A little hiking.
We have been working on a document for a while, and it's our top 50 books of all time, and it's ready.
That's it. You can grab our top 50 books where we've ranked our favourite and most impactful books that we've read so far. And, a bit of a spiel on each one, and you can grab a copy for yourself whilst you're in there, and it's a phenomenal document, I reckon.
Most of the books we haven't reviewed yet, so I reckon your reading list will be popped up by a few after reading that one.
Exactly, man. We won't give away too many spoilers, but there's some absolute juggernauts in that top 50, as you would expect.
Yeah.
Head to whatyou'lllearn.com/top50, and you can download that report of the top 50 books of all time, 2018 version.
All free.